It's Dr. Glenn. And today we're going to talk about why emotional marketing is so difficult. You've heard me talk over the years about the emotional benefit marketing model and how every feature ladders up to a particular emotional benefit, which then ladders up to self-esteem itself. We've talked about how to focus on those benefits and how to link them to the features and functions in your copy. And today I want to talk about the um, emotional conflicts that emotional marketing engenders in emotional marketers, or why so many people seem to have difficulty getting infusing emotion in their advertising and the type of emotion that actually leads to sales. So, a very interesting perspective, kind of a different thing that we've talked about before. Although I need to go over some things that I've talked about before in order to get there. So, why do people give us money? And you've heard, if you've been around the marketing crowd for any period of time, probably two sets of standard answers. You've heard that people only give us money to make money, save money, improve their health, lose weight, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's the seven essential human motivations. And then you've heard Sharon and I talk about emotional motivations, which is moving from one of the three negative emotions. There's really three core negative emotions of mad, sad, and scared, to some variation of feeling glad, like feeling a sense of belonging or being in control or feeling like a good nurturer or feeling attractive or enjoying life. Some gradation of glad, and you've heard about us talk about the 37 gradations that we ran a whole set of studies to come up with. Well, I want to talk about a new paradigm. It's something which Sunny Hills inspired me to um, put together, even though he doesn't know it. This is from a conversation we had probably 6 years ago. And I was interviewing Sunny about life coaching, of all things. Most people know Sunny from SaveYourAds.com as a kind of pay-per-click wizard. A Google manager, pay-per-click wizard, originally a Google arbitrager. I think, believe it or not, he still does Google arbitrage very successfully, but don't quote me on that because it's been a few years since we talked about that. But what Sunny said when I was talking to him about life coaching was, Glenn, the reason that people feel that a coaching session is successful, I'm paraphrasing him again, is if you've helped them to think new thoughts. And that phrase really stuck with me. If you've helped them to think new thoughts. And I thought, yeah, um, whenever I've gone into a coaching session and felt like it really had an improvement in my life, it's because at the end of it, I had some new thought. And that new thought opened up a sense of hope and mastery and new avenues for solving problems and mastering my environment and generally improving my life. Um, and what I want to suggest to you is that you can apply that paradigm to any situation where people give you money. That if there is, when your prospect is becoming a customer, in some way you have helped them to think a new thought. They're thinking something new about the problem that they have. They might be thinking something new about the human need that they're trying to solve. But in some way you're helping them to think new thoughts. And this is important for understanding the particular obstacle that we all encounter as we endeavor to become emotional marketers. You'll see what I mean in a minute. So, I want to do a little bit of a reframe of one of my earlier concepts. You've heard me talk about price of entry versus point of difference benefits. And a price of entry benefit, as I've talked about it in the past, is anything that's required for you to play the game in the market. So when a consumer does a search, for, let's say widescreen monitors, there is a whole set of fundamentals that they're probably looking for before they're going to consider, a monitor as a viable option whatsoever. But a point of difference is a benefit that speaks to a market gap. It's something that really distinguishes you, and we all strive to organize a unique selling proposition around a point of difference benefit. And I've talked about the emotional leading market where um, Sharon is offering guilt-free, stress-free weight loss using all the same delicious foods they love now, as opposed to lose 30 pounds in 30 days. She's helping them to restore their confidence in their ability to control their weight with guilt-free, stress-free eating of all the same delicious foods they love now. And that's much different than 30 pounds in 30 days, which is what most of the other vendors are providing. You've heard that story before, so I won't bore you with it. But what I do want to do is reframe this and talk about how it's possible to make a sale on price of entry benefits if the benefit that you're conveying to people is a new thought for that particular person. So, for example, the other day I'm talking to Terry Dean, and we're recording a product on how to sell with video online, which I'm not an expert at, but he is. And he's talking about, the width of the monitors that most computer users have these days. And it came up that I actually am still using a fairly small monitor because I tend to be a late adopter of those types of new technologies because it takes so much time for me to, learn them and install them. And instead, I just focus on what I think is more mission critical for my business. And he said, "Well, Glenn, how old are you?" And I'm just about 47, and my eyesight is kind of going. And I actually had to get bifocals not too long ago. I had to get bifocals, and my wife told me to put sunscreen in my bald spot, and my beard is going gray, and all those lovely things. And he said, "Well, you spend an awful lot of time in the computer. It's much better to have a wider screen because you'll have a lot less eye strain." And I said, "Really?" That was a new thought for me. Now, I'm sure that 90% of you listening, there's probably not a new thought to. Probably most of you are using a wider screen monitor than I am, but I rushed right out and I bought a new widescreen monitor because that was a new thought for me. What I'm trying to get across here is that regardless of whether you're selling on a price of entry benefit or a point of difference benefit, that there are new thoughts taking place when you convince a customer to give you money for the first time. Okay, that having been said, let's talk about what's so difficult about helping customers to think truly new thoughts in your market. Well, okay, if you really want to take a dominant position in your market, then what you need to do is find the new thoughts in that market. But finding those new thoughts means you have to be able to find things that no one else has had the courage to look at and figure out why no one else is willing to think them. So they're the types of things that are shocking at first. Sometimes they sound outrageous, but they're not shocking or outrageous for the sake of being shocking or outrageous. They're shocking or outrageous because there are market forces and psychological forces and sometimes political forces which have conspired to repress these thoughts in the market, to actually make it unpalatable for some reason for some people to say it in the most natural form that they occur in. You want to figure out how to say it, more palatably, and then you really stand out and people form an emotional bond with you like nothing I've ever seen. But in order to do that, you have to face this overwhelming set of forces, and I'm going to give you a specific example in just a moment. And that means that you have to think these new thoughts, which will make you feel crazy because everybody else is going to be saying something else, right? So the thing is, if you've done your homework, I would never encourage people to do this without doing their homework and looking at the fact patterns. And for me, this usually involves many months of researching and organizing and reading and talking to experts and talking to consumers and putting this all together. In that situation, when you have the evidence, what you'll find is that the more people that think you're out of your mind, the more new thoughts you're actually going to be introducing, and the more money you should make. Um, I think you'll understand why that makes sense in the context of what we're talking about. But I think you'll also see that it creates a tremendous obstacle because, for example, um, as I am studying marketing and studying marketing and studying marketing and figuring out why, um, I think it's up to 95% of internet businesses are now failing. Um, I have come to the conclusion that a big part of that is because people don't quite understand what it means to market to a desperate problem, or what it means to um, position your problem, the problem that your product or service solves, in such a way that the prospect feels desperate for your solution. And they don't understand that if you don't do that, that they're not going to part with their hard-earned money, especially in recent economic times. And now, as I've gone that far and gotten to that positioning, um, even my wife thinks I'm nuts. She says, "Glenn, aren't you a psychologist? Do you really want to encourage people to agitate others and make them feel desperate and um, create a situation where people feel desperate for things to buy?" And the truth is, I do, because I'm assuming that I'm working with ethical marketers, and if I'm going to teach marketing at all, that I have to teach the most valuable things in marketing, and that you're selling or providing a service or a product which people are actually better off if they do buy than they don't, assuming you're marketing to the right people. And so I do want them to feel desperate for your products and services. But as I'm venturing further and further into this market, I'm realizing that wow, I mean, there are things that I'm needing to tell people that even my wife is going to be upset with me about. And at some point, you're really standing alone, at least for a while, at least until you get out there and and figure out how to communicate it to the market in a palatable way. At some point, you're standing alone, and everyone is telling you that you're nuts. And the people you love the most are telling you that you're nuts. And so this is why it's difficult to think new thoughts. This is why it's difficult to embrace the type of passionate, emotional marketing which actually infuses people with the passion to buy. Um, I'm going to talk about a quick example, and this example actually makes me nervous to talk about in public because I actually do have an opinion that is widely different than the majority of the culture, that it's widely different than the majority of other licensed professionals. Remember, I am coming from the perspective originally of a licensed psychologist, and this is something that it's entirely possible I'll get a letter from my licensing board saying, what are you doing, Glenn? And the reason I can do it, the reason I'm willing to do it, is because it's the truth, and because if I get that letter, I will just say to them, well, show me the evidence that I'm wrong, and there is no evidence. Okay, as you might imagine, as a psychologist, I've had reason to encounter addicted people, and I've had quite some dealings with the addiction treatment industry. And I've done quite some reading about addiction. In addition to, I think everybody at some point should really study the nature of addiction because we're always fighting impulses, um, for not just for drugs and alcohol and food, but for making choices about short-term versus long-term gratification. And the addiction treatment industry is about how we're constructed as a human animal, and how do we master our impulses and make more of ourselves in life. So I really think everybody should study that at some point, but I'm digressing. So in the culture and in the medical world and in the psychological professional world in which I live, the common wisdom is that addiction is a disease, that there's something different about the genetics of people who are addicted that makes it impossible for them to say no to whatever their addictive substance is. And this, if you start to study where this came from, you'll see that it was far from always the case. As a culture, and this is part of what's very interesting and should get your attention, as a culture, before we actually had such a thriving addiction problem, our cultural attitude was to tell people to knock it off, or sometimes we put them in the clink if they got dangerous, or we'd say, hey, some gentlemen just don't drink. But you know, in and around the late 1800s, early 1900s, there started to arise more addicts showing up with their doctors, and then the 12-step movement came in the 30s, and this disease model came into vogue where people said, I'm powerless over my desire, and I'm powerless over my body. There's something different about me. I'm genetically incapable of abstaining. It's not possible for me to say no. In the absence of help, I have to get help. I need help. I need help. I need help. And I'm very much in favor of people getting help for all the feelings and certainly for the physical um, situations they go through after they make a decision to quit. But there's no scientific evidence that suggests that we are powerless over our bodies. As a matter of fact, it's just the opposite. And I would encourage anybody to read a book called Addiction is a Choice if they're curious about that. And the few controlled studies there really are, because it's hard to do controlled studies about addiction because of the nature of it. It's something people want to be anonymous about. But the few controlled studies that there really are suggest that treatment is either at parity or actually worse than doing nothing at all. And so what you find is that this is really an American tragedy, which not only lobotomizes the addict's autonomy, um, but it actually encourages addiction, and it's the exact opposite of what the culture as a whole believes. This is something I would imagine that 98% of you are thinking, Glenn, this sounds crazy, um, and I don't blame you for thinking that. That's what I thought up until a few years ago when I did some more extensive research and looked at the evidence. So before you send me hate mail, I would encourage you to start looking at the evidence. And someone who a marketer, and he's really didn't do this from a marketing perspective. He really did this because he's trying to spread the word. Because he really believes in his cause, and he's trying to do some social engineering and turn the tides. Someone who I think does this very successfully is this man, Jack Trimpney at rational.org. So if you wanted to study this in more detail and see how he does it in a specific example, I would encourage you to do that. You can also look at all the hate mail that he gets and the extreme controversy, and most importantly, look at how he has to stand alone. Put yourself in his position. Go over there and read what's on the site. Look at how people are talking to him, and think about how this guy has to stand 100% alone in order to rally the troops around him. Now he's got thousands of troops around him at this point, and he's actually making a big difference. But in order to get there, he had to be tremendously courageous and brave. So once you figure out that there are facts in your market that are wildly suppressed, and that there is some essential truth that people are just not seeing, and if you spend enough time in any market, I guarantee you will start to feel like that and you will see that. Then you need to ask, what is it that is suppressing this information? Why is it so difficult for people to see the truth? And why are the marketers telling them the opposite? And you need to kind of really get straight what forces you're up against before you start comprising marketing messages, because you're going to need to know what everybody's major objections are and how you're going to diffuse them, before you go into the full force marketing effort. So in addiction, it's a lot easier for doctors and loved ones to forgive addicted family members for a disease rather than to say, hey, this guy's a stinking drunk, or he's an addict, or he's pursuing his own pleasure at the expense of serious harm to the family. And so, addicts get this moral pass, and so do the family members, and it's very, very difficult for anybody to stand up and say, no, it's not a disease. This is a choice. But that's what the evidence says. And the other couple of reasons here are that addiction is actually a survival drive. it's attached to an erroneous substance, and that's why it's so difficult for people why they really don't want to quit. It's not why they can't quit because they can, but it's why they don't want to. And the passion and energy behind the whole treatment movement is tremendous because of that. Plus, there's a fortune to be made in the addiction treatment movement because people don't want to accept that all they need to do is quit, forever, probably forever, if they're really addicted. They would rather, say that they were powerless. They feel a lot less guilty saying they're powerless. Their family treats them better if they say they're powerless. The doctors have someplace to send them if they say that they're powerless. And all of this conspires together to obfuscate what the truth is. So, what I want you to take away as a marketer is you spend enough time in that industry and you will see things that nobody else is seeing. And then you need to figure out why no one else is willing to see them. Because when something is that obvious, when the emperor has no clothes, there are reasons why nobody else is standing up and saying the emperor has no clothes. And you need to know those reasons before you get out and go up against them. Okay. Um, in the web conversion, in the web conversion industry, the people like Terry and I who are teaching you how to convert web visitors, and I do it with research, and Terry's done it with copywriting. Um, Other marketers have been telling you that there's some kind of a creative magic possessed by copywriters. Um, and it's difficult for people to learn. And if you take the other courses, it's very, very hard to find a step-by-step formula for piecing things together. For starting with a blank page and actually piecing it all together step by step. That anybody can do. And the thing that I think, and Terry thinks, um, the other marketers don't want you to know, is that web conversion is actually a process which requires a lot of time and energy and involvement and that four-letter word work, because you got to do some comprehensive research and go through step-by-step copywriting principles and get the bullets out and get the headlines out and get them organized and then develop a follow-up system. Well, gurus don't really want you to know that because they'll kind of dance around it, but nobody ever talks about that dreaded word work because that's antithetical to their self-interest in selling it to you. It's actually antithetical to my self-interest in selling you the total conversion code, which we're going to be launching in a month or two. But I would rather you have the information that actually works, and those people who are like-minded to myself, interested in the relentless pursuit of reality and want a simple path up a mountain, but nevertheless a path up a mountain where you have to go step by step and walk the path, who prefer that to running around in the dark for years on end. I would rather attract those people than the people who want to live on hopium. That's Ari Galper's term, and that's one of the forces that prevents the truth from coming out because hope feels a lot better. The idea of a magic solution feels a lot better than an actual path up a mountain that is going to require us to walk. So that's the truth. By the way, I'd like you to take a look at Total Conversion Code and sign up for the early bird notice if you're interested. We're maybe a month away from launch, if thereabouts, about a month away from launch, and people on that list will get the first notice and earliest price and the best price for that product. There's also the video traffic arena. You might have seen me talking about that lately, and we've got a guaranteed done for you service, meaning that we actually guarantee the ranking. Most SEO companies just charge you for their time and labor, but we're actually guaranteeing the ranking. And I would highly encourage you to check that out before we have no more capacity, because that's what happens quickly in done for services, especially with a guarantee like this, where if you do the math in terms of anticipated click through and traffic volume in most markets, we're really selling traffic at an extraordinary discount, really selling highly targeted traffic at an extraordinary discount. And Is it possible we won't be able to do it for certain situations? Yes, maybe, but then we have to give your money back. So um, I think that's really worth checking out. And the reason that this belongs in this presentation is that the truth is the video landscape is wide open. The major search engines really are heavily favoring videos now. Forrester Research was out with a study that showed that the engines were 50 times more likely to rank a video than a text page, but that video has to be, um, it has to be packaged correctly. It's got to have the right hosting. It's got to have the right sources. It's got to have the right links. Lots of things have to go into place to make that happen. And you could learn how to do it yourself, but it requires involvement, time, and work. And if you don't want to do that as a full-time professional, then it's probably not the best use of your time and highest and best use of your time. So have a look at getmorevideotraffic.com. I think you'll be happy you did. Um, so here's the gist of this. What you want to do after you're immersed in your market for enough time, after you've talked to enough experts, after you've talked to enough consumers, after you've looked at the social media research, after you've done my hyper-responsive process at glennsentme.com, after you've done all that, you should be able to see something which 80% or more of the people in your market seem to believe, which makes you want to stand up and scream bullshit, if you're totally honest with yourself. And when you find that thing, you want to ask yourself, well, why do they believe it? What powerful forces exist in the industry, the government, the market as a whole, the social unit of the family? What forces are existing that are sustaining the beliefs in spite of the evidence? Why is nobody willing to say the emperor has no clothes? And this is important also, is it the right thing to do to take the contrarian position? There are situations where it's not the right thing to do. I will tell you that in nutrition, one of the things you might ask yourself is, why, with the level of scientific inquiry we've developed and the funding that's gone into studying nutrition, why is it still so controversial? Why is it that it seems like nobody agrees, other than the fact that we should probably all have more greens, and organic, non-irradiated greens at that? Other than that, why is it nobody can seem to agree on what the heck we're supposed to eat? And when I looked into that, I spent a lot of time researching that in the emotional eating market. I found that there were reasons and they're actually good reasons why some of that is obfuscated. And I didn't think it was the right thing to do to reveal, what I thought the truth was, because I don't think that there is a good solution yet. And so I think probably the best solution is for people to find their own way and, read the research themselves and put together what works for them. And so I just didn't think it was the right thing to do. And I was only, so Sharon really focuses less on the nutritional aspect of things and more on the psychological aspect of things there. When you have it all together, then you need to say, well, how do you link the new thoughts to the benefits that the market already wants in the language they used to seek it? So that is my little emotional marketing lesson for today. I hope that was helpful to you. I hope you'll check out the links underneath the video, and I will talk to you soon. Thanks.